The blind stableman had not seen the throne in 4 years, yet he walked straight toward it when the king's warhorse crashed through the ballroom doors and knelt at his feet. Only minutes earlier, Lena Hart had been trying to disappear beside the servants' entrance of Stonehaven Palace. She stood beneath silver chandeliers with a tray of red wine balanced between her hands, dressed in the grey uniform reserved for omegas who were useful enough to serve, but not important enough to be seen. Beyond her, the crown oath ball glittered with black velvet, diamonds, military medals, and every powerful pack in the Northern Territories. At midnight, Regent Malcolm Vane would place the moon crown upon his head. 4 years had passed since Alpha King Caelan Ashbourne vanished at Red Hollow. By ancient law, the crown could finally choose a new ruler. Try not to smell like horses when the crown chooses its king, a woman said behind her. Lena turned. Seraphine Vane, the regent's daughter, watched her in a silver gown. Beside her stood Grant Mercer, the alpha heir who had once promised to take Lena as his mate, then rejected her before their entire pack when her wolf failed to shift. "You remember Grant, don't you?" Seraphine asked. "I remember everyone who taught me something useful. And what did he teach you?" "That promises made in public are often broken in public." A few nearby guests laughed. Seraphine's smile hardened. She reached for a glass, then struck the tray with 2 jeweled fingers. Red wine spilled down Lena's dress. Silver cups rolled across the marble. The old humiliation returned. Grant beneath the pack banners, declaring that a future alpha could not bind himself to an omega who might never shift again. No one had defended the young woman who had once run into a burning stable to save his little sister. Lena knelt to gather the cups. "Leave them," Seraphine said. "Someone from the stables will clean it." Someone from the stables usually does. A small brass bell rang at Lena's wrist. At the far end of the ballroom, a tall man stood beneath the open archway. Dark hair brushed the collar of his worn stable coat. A pale scar crossed his right temple, and black cloth covered his ruined eyes. In one hand he held the wooden cane Lena had carved for him 3 winters earlier. Elias Gray was supposed to be checking the eastern stalls. "Elias?" He turned toward her bell. The crowd opened around him. Elias crossed the marble without hesitation and stopped beside Lena. "Who touched you?" he asked. His voice was low, but one royal wolfhound near the dais lifted its head. "I'm fine," Seraphine laughed. "How loyal." The rejected omega and her blind stray. Elias faced her. "Apologize." The laughter stopped. Grant stepped forward. "You forget where you are, groom." "No," Elias said. "I remember exactly where I am." A guard reached for Lena. Elias moved before the man touched her. His cane struck the floor, his free hand caught the guard's wrist, and one precise turn forced the armored soldier to his knees. Gasps swept through the hall. From beneath the throne canopy, Regent Malcolm Vane rose. For the first time Lena had ever seen, his expression was not calm. His eyes fixed on Elias, with naked recognition. "Seize that man," Commander Marcus Reed hesitated. "On what charge, my lord?" "Theft of royal property. Impersonation. Treason." Seraphine reached inside Elias's coat and pulled out a black signet ring on a leather cord. The crowned wolf of House Ashbourne gleamed beneath the chandeliers. The ballroom inhaled. Lena knew the ring. She had found it years ago inside the torn lining of Elias's coat, but he had never explained it. Malcolm pointed at him. "A servant carrying the missing king's seal. How long have you been preparing this fraud?" Elias said nothing. Malcolm turned to Lena. "This man used a lonely omega to shelter him. Has he ever told you his family name?" "No." "Where he came from?" "No." "Why a blind groom understands royal combat?" Lena looked at the guard rubbing his wrist. "No." "Then step away from him." Every instinct she had learned as an unprotected omega told her to obey. One order from Malcolm could take her work, her room, and what little safety she possessed. Elias released her wrist, giving her the choice. That decided her. Lena stepped in front of him. "I don't know who he was before I found him," she said. "I know who he has been since. He has never asked for rank, money, or protection. If that ring could give him power, he would have used it years ago." Malcolm's face hardened. "Remove them both." The guards advanced. A violent crash shook the ballroom doors. Wood split inward. Nobles scattered as a massive black stallion burst into the hall, trailing broken reins. Nightfall, the missing king's warhorse, had allowed no rider near him since Red Hollow. Handlers followed, shouting warnings. The stallion ignored them. He crossed the polished floor toward Elias. Malcolm went white. Elias lifted his chin and whistled 3 short notes. Nightfall stopped. The great horse lowered his head into Elias's waiting hand, then folded his front legs and knelt. Along the walls, every royal wolfhound lowered itself to the marble. Elias stroked the stallion's brow. "You poisoned them so they would forget me," he said. Then he turned toward the throne. "You forgot loyalty. Has a memory." A crack split the silence. The moon crown fractured beneath Malcolm's hand. Commander Marcus Reed stared at Elias, as though the dead had spoken. "That voice," he whispered. "It belonged to my king." 4 years earlier, Lena Hart stood beneath the white banners of the Silver Pine Pack and listened to the man who had promised to choose her explain why she was no longer worthy of him. The bonding hall was crowded with wolves from 6 territories. Candles burned along the stone walls while Grant Mercer waited before the ceremonial fire in a black alpha coat. He did not look at Lena when the elder asked him to take her hand. "I cannot complete the bond," Grant said. The words were quiet, but everyone heard them. Lena's fingers tightened around the ribbon tied at her wrist. "You agreed to this." "I agreed before the fire. 3 months earlier, the western stables had caught fire during a lightning storm. Lena had run inside while stronger wolves waited for the roof to collapse. She carried Grant's little sister through the smoke, freed 3 foals, and dragged an injured groom beneath a falling beam. Silver nails from the burning roof cut into her shoulder and poisoned the wolf spirit inside her. Since that night, she could feel her wolf, but could no longer complete the shift. Grant finally looked at her. There was shame in his eyes, but not enough courage to stand beside her. A future alpha cannot bind himself to an omega who may never shift again. No one mentioned the child Lena had saved. She untied the ceremonial ribbon and let it fall into the fire. "You should have said this before inviting half the territory to watch. I did not want to humiliate you." "No. You wanted witnesses so no one could question your decision." By sunset, her room had been cleared. Silverpine gave her 3 days of food, 1 winter cloak, and permission to leave without punishment. They called it mercy. Lena called it exile. She traveled north until Stonehaven Palace rose above the trees. The royal household did not ask whether she could shift. They only asked whether she could work. By winter, she was sleeping in a narrow room above the eastern stables and treating horses injured by careless riders. The man who later called himself Elias Gray arrived during the first storm. Lena found a wrecked carriage beyond the northern pasture after a mare returned without its driver. 1 wheel had shattered, and the wooden frame was burned black beneath the snow. Inside lay a man in a torn dark coat. He was tall enough that his boots struck the opposite wall. Dark hair clung to his forehead. A silver burn crossed his right temple and disappeared beneath a blood-soaked bandage covering both eyes. His palms carried old sword calluses. Lena touched his throat. Alive. The man seized her wrist. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said. "Where am I?" 2 miles from Stonehaven. His grip loosened. "Is the palace still standing?" The question was strange. But Lena blamed fever. "Yes." He turned his face toward the distant towers as though he could see them through the snow and ruined cloth covering his eyes. She brought him back on a stable sled. The palace steward refused responsibility. A blind stranger without papers could not serve in the royal household, and the infirmary beds were reserved for soldiers, nobles, and bonded pack members. He can recover in the tack room, Lena argued. I'll feed him from my wages. You barely feed yourself. Then I'll work another shift. The stable master, Amos Bell, studied the stranger before granting reluctant permission. The man woke 2 days later. He remembered how to handle weapons, speak several territorial dialects, and identify horses by their breathing. He claimed to remember nothing useful about himself. What should I call you? Lena asked. Elias. Elias what? He hesitated. Gray. Lena knew it was probably false. She also knew what it felt like when strangers demanded explanations before offering shelter, so she gave him work instead of questions. She tied different knots around each stall door so he could navigate by touch, placed a wooden cane beside his bed, and walked him through the stable, wearing a small brass bell around her wrist. Follow the sound, she told him. I dislike bells. You dislike walls more. You walked into 2 today. For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved. That night, Lena woke to his voice through the thin wall between their rooms. Hold the eastern line, he said in his sleep. Get the civilians behind the gate. Then his voice broke. Nightfall. Lena assumed it was the name of someone he had failed to save. The next morning, she led Elias past the sealed royal stall. Inside, the black warhorse that had attacked every handler since King Kaelan vanished struck the door hard enough to shake the hinges. Elias stopped. Nightfall stopped with him. For years, no one had quieted the animal without chains or sedatives. Now the stallion pressed his nose against the wooden door and released a low, trembling breath. Elias turned his bandaged eyes toward him. Who is in that stall? Lena stared at the suddenly peaceful horse, the missing king's warhorse. For weeks, Elias moved through the eastern stables like a man learning the shape of a prison. He counted every step from the tack room to the feed bins, memorized each floorboard, and learned which doors groaned before they opened. Lena kept the brass bell tied around her wrist while working near him. 2 steps left, she would say. I know. You walked into that post yesterday. The post moved. It has held up the same roof for 80 years. He almost smiled whenever she argued with him, but he never laughed publicly. Most of the stable hands disliked having him there. A blind groom slowed the work, they said. He could not read labels, see a horse preparing to kick, or carry full buckets without risking a spill. They called him Charity, Stray, and worse. Elias answered by becoming better than all of them. Within a month, he could identify every horse by its breathing. He knew which mare had a swollen tendon before it became visible. He could hear a loose shoe from across the aisle and calm frightened animals with one hand against their necks. Even Amos Bell stopped questioning whether he belonged. Lena helped, where sight still mattered. She stitched raised symbols into his gloves, marked medicine bottles with different cords, and read palace notices aloud in the evenings. Elias pretended not to care about decrees involving taxes, borders, and pack alliances, yet he remembered every name and date. Once, Lena misread the title of a northern lord. Duke Harrow lost that title 12 years ago, Elias corrected. She lowered the page. How do you know that? Soldiers hear things. You corrected the mapmaker last week. He was wrong. You have never seen that map. I have seen roads. His answers always closed the door before she could step through it. In return, Elias taught Lena things no stableman should know. He showed her how to recognize military ranks by boot patterns, break an alpha's grip without matching his strength, and tell when someone was lying by the pause before an answer. You listen too carefully, Lena told him. People reveal more when they think they are ignored. She wondered whether that was how he had survived. The first winter was the hardest. Snow buried the lower windows, and the palace cut servant rations when grain deliveries failed. Elias began leaving half his bread near Lena's medicine chest. She returned it 3 times. On the 4th, he said, "If you put it back again, I will feed it to the mice. There are no mice in my infirmary. Then eat before they arrive." She kept the bread. When pain woke her wolf spirit during the coldest nights, Elias sat outside her door without speaking. He never asked her to explain the shaking or the scars beneath her shoulder. He stayed until her breathing slowed. By spring, Lena no longer rang the bell for his sake. She rang it because he always turned toward the sound. Years passed in small routines. Elias repaired the leaking roof above her room. Lena replaced the black cloth over his eyes whenever it frayed. They shared coffee before dawn, argued over horse medicine, and played strategy games with carved wooden pieces. Elias won almost every time. "You sacrificed too much to protect one piece," he said after cornering her queen. "Maybe the piece is worth protecting. A ruler who thinks that way loses the board. A ruler who does not think that way loses everyone on it." His fingers went still over the king piece. The moment passed, but Lena remembered it. So did the animals. Nightfall remained dangerous with every other handler, yet stood quietly whenever Elias approached the sealed stall. The royal wolfhound stopped barking when he crossed the courtyard. During thunderstorms, every horse in the eastern wing turned toward his room before the first lightning strike. Lena told herself animals trusted calm people. Elias was calm because anger cost him more than most men. Then, one autumn evening, a drunken groom named Hollis cornered Lena behind the feed shed. Grant Mercer's pack had arrived for a council meeting, and Hollis knew she was the Omega who had been rejected. "Maybe your old Alpha was right," he said, blocking the path. "Maybe a wolfless girl should be grateful for any attention." Lena told him to move. He grabbed her arm. Elias appeared before she could shout. He had no bell to follow and no cane in his hand. Hollis laughed. "What are you going to do, blind man?" Elias tilted his head, listening. When Hollis lunged, Elias stepped aside, caught his wrist, drove one shoulder into his chest, and put him on the ground in less than 3 seconds. He did not strike again. "Touch her once more," Elias said, "and blindness will be the least of your problems." Hollis fled. Lena stared at Elias. "How did you know where I was?" "You stopped ringing." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." Later, while mending his torn sleeve, Lena found a hard shape beneath the lining. She cut one stitch and pulled out a black ring marked with a crowned wolf beneath a crescent moon, the royal signet of House Ashbourne. When she placed it in Elias's palm, he did not ask what it was. He closed his fingers around it and said, "You should have left it buried." The next morning, Elias refused to explain the ring. Lena stood inside the tack room with the royal signet resting between them on a folded cloth. "You knew it was sewn into your coat," she said. "Yes, and you let me keep repairing that coat for 4 years without saying anything. I hoped you would never find it. That is not an explanation." Elias turned his face toward the window. "It is the safest answer I can give you." Lena hated that answer because part of her understood it. Still, the man before her was no longer a stranger she had pulled from a burned carriage. He had shared her meals and guarded her sleep. "Were you one of King Kaelin's guards?" "No." "A court official?" "No." "Did you steal the ring?" His jaw tightened. "No." "Then who gave it to you?" Elias closed his fingers over the signet. "Someone who trusted me with more than he should have." Before Lena could press further, the palace bells began to ring. Not the slow morning bells used for the missing king. These were bright, ceremonial notes that rolled from the western tower across the courtyard. Stable hands stopped working. Guards straightened along the walls. Even Nightfall struck the floor of his stall and lifted his head. A royal herald entered the stable yard carrying a black and silver scroll. "By decree of Regent Malcolm Vane," he announced, "the 4-year mourning period for Alpha King Kaelin Ashbourne will end at the next full moon. A crown oath ball will be held at Stonehaven Palace. Before the assembled packs, the Moon Crown will select a new ruler for the Northern Territories." Whispers moved through the yard. The herald continued. "All royal witnesses required by ancient law will be presented, including the king's warhorse and the palace wolfhounds." Lena looked at Elias. He had gone completely still. The herald read the final lines. Every recognized alpha house may attend. Eligible daughters of noble blood will be presented to the chosen ruler following the oath. A cheer rose from several younger grooms. The noble families had waited years for this. A new king meant new alliances and titles. Elias did not move until the herald left. Then he said, "You will not attend." Lena stared at him. "I was not invited. You will be ordered to serve." "You sound certain." "I know how Malcolm stages loyalty. He places every witness in the room, then controls what each one is allowed to see." The way he spoke, the regent's name, made the air feel colder. "You know him," Lena said. Elias picked up his cane. "Stay away from the ball." He left before she could stop him. Over the following week, Stonehaven changed. Black and silver banners covered walls that had mourned an absent king for years. Tailors arrived with bolts of silver cloth. Servants polished floors that were already bright enough to reflect candlelight. Noble families filled the guest wings, bringing guards, jewels, and daughters, trained to smile at power. The royal stables received new instructions as well. Nightfall was to be groomed, sedated if necessary, and presented during the oath. The palace wolfhounds were placed on a special ceremonial diet. Crates of medicine arrived under the regent's seal. Lena distrusted them immediately. Nightfall had grown weaker over the past month. His black coat had lost its shine, and his movements were slower. Some days, his pupils narrowed until they became thin slits. He still attacked every handler who entered his stall, but the anger now looked less like strength and more like pain. Lena checked his pulse and found it racing. "Easy," she whispered. "I know." The horse pressed his forehead against the bars separating him from the aisle. When Elias approached, Nightfall stopped trembling. "What did they give him?" Elias asked. "A calming tonic. Calming animals does not make their hearts beat faster." Lena carried the bottle to her work table. The liquid smelled of mint, crushed valerian, and something metallic hidden underneath. She spread one drop across a white testing stone. A pale blue stain appeared. Her stomach tightened. She opened the cabinet where Elias's eye medicine was stored and tested that liquid beside it. The same blue stain spread across the stone. Moonban. In small amounts, the poison weakened a wolf's scent and disrupted recognition between bonded animals. In larger doses, it caused blindness, memory loss, and an inability to shift. Lena looked toward Elias. For 4 years, she had placed those drops into his eyes because the palace physician said they would prevent infection. "They were never treating you," she whispered. Elias's expression did not change, but his grip tightened around his cane. "They were keeping you blind." A crash sounded from the corridor above them. Lena ran toward Elias's room. The door hung open. His blankets had been torn apart, the mattress cut, and every floorboard pried loose. The hidden compartment where the royal signet had once rested was empty. There was blood on the edge of the bed. "Elias?" No answer came. His cane lay broken beneath the window. Elias was gone. Lena did not scream. That was the first lesson exile had taught her. Screaming only helped if someone wanted to come. In Stonehaven Palace, too many people had learned to look away when trouble came from above. She knelt beside the broken cane and touched the blood on the bedframe. It was still wet. Whoever had taken Elias had not gone far. The room smelled of torn wool, boot oil, and cold iron. Not palace physicians. Not drunk grooms. Guards. Lena forced herself to breathe. Elias had taught her that panic made the world smaller. Details made it useful. One blanket had been dragged toward the window, but there were no footprints in the mud below. A false trail. On the floor near the wall, 3 scratches cut through the dust. Short, long. Their signal, not outside. Below. Lena took the moonbane bottle, wrapped it in cloth, and slipped it into her apron. Then she followed the servant corridor down past the washroom, through the old kennel passage, and into a storage hall abandoned since the winter floods. A drop of blood marked the stone near the stairwell. At the bottom, voices carried through the dark. You expect me to believe a blind stableman keeps the royal seal by accident? Commander Marcus Reed asked. I expect you to ask why the regent searched my room before accusing me, Elias answered. Lena stopped behind a cracked pillar. Elias sat tied to a chair beneath a hanging lantern. His blindfold was gone. Clouded grey eyes stared at nothing, but his face was calm. Too calm. Commander Marcus stood before him with 2 guards at his back and the royal signet in his gloved hand. You are either a thief, a spy, or a fool, Marcus said. Possibly all 3, but not in the order you prefer. One guard struck Elias across the mouth. Lena nearly stepped out. Elias only turned his head back toward Marcus. Your men are impatient. My men think the king's seal should not be found in a servant's coat. Then your men are thinking too late. Marcus leaned closer. Who are you? Elias was silent. Marcus lowered his voice. Give me one reason not to take you to Regent Vane. Elias lifted his face toward the sound of him. What oath did you swear at Red Hollow? The lantern flame stirred. Marcus went still. I never spoke of Red Hollow to any servant. No, you spoke it to a dying boy beside the eastern barricade. You told him the King's Guard does not retreat while civilians are still behind the gate. Marcus's hand tightened around the signet. How do you know that? Because you were wrong. The guard did retreat that night. Marcus drew his sword halfway from its sheath. Careful, and your king ordered it. Elias continued, voice low. Because he would rather lose ground than leave children in a burning chapel. No one spoke. Lena stepped from the shadows before Marcus could decide whether memory was enough to kill for. He was taken from his room, she said. If you wanted answers, Commander, you could have asked without bleeding him. The guards turned on her, but Marcus raised a hand. Miss Hart, you should not be here. People keep saying that right before they lie to me. She placed the wrapped moonbane bottle on a crate. This was in the medicine sent for Elias's eyes. The same poison is being fed to Nightfall and the wolfhounds. Marcus frowned. Moonbane? Yes. Enough to weaken recognition, royal scent, and shift response. Someone wants the animals present at the oath, but unable to remember who they belong to. Marcus looked at Elias. Elias did not deny it. Lena moved behind him and cut the rope around his wrists, with the small hoof knife hidden in her sleeve. One guard stepped forward. Marcus stopped him again. Do you understand the accusation you are making? He asked Lena. I understand the pattern. The warhorse, the hounds, and Elias all show the same symptoms. Blurred scent, disorientation, reaction to silver, suppressed wolf response. Elias is not a royal animal. No, she said. But someone is treating him like one. Marcus's expression shifted, not into belief, but into fear of what belief would cost. There is a book, Elias said. Amos Bell kept records no stable master should have needed. Feed amounts, patrol shifts, farrier visits. He used numbers when words were dangerous. Lena remembered the old ledger locked inside Amos's former office, a dull brown book nobody touched, because it seemed full of hay orders and shoeing expenses. Amos died in prison, Marcus said. He was murdered before he could speak, Elias replied. Marcus stared down at the signet. If I help you and this is false, I hang. If you help Malcolm and this is true, Lena said, you already should. That reached him. An hour later, they stood inside Amos Bell's dusty office with the door barred behind them. Lena opened the ledger while Elias listened from the chair beside her. The columns looked ordinary. Oats, salt, winter blankets, hoof oil, but certain numbers repeated in patterns. Elias guided her through them. Every third entry, he said. Read the first letter of the item, then the number as a date. Lena worked slowly until the message formed beneath her finger. King alive after Red Hollow. Brought under guard. Moonbane ordered by MV Stable Wing safest. Crown cannot pass while blood remains unclaimed. Her throat tightened. Marcus crossed himself in the old northern way. Lena looked at Elias. Are you Kaelin Ashbourne? The room felt smaller around the question. Elias closed his useless eyes. "If I say yes," he said, "every person who has ever been kind to me becomes a target." Lena removed the brass bell from her wrist and placed it in his hand. "Then do not say it yet," she said. "But stop deciding what risks I am allowed to take." Kalen held the brass bell in his open palm, as though it weighed more than the royal signet. For 4 years, Lena had worn that bell so a blind stableman could find her. Now it lay between them like an oath she had never meant to make. Commander Marcus barred the office door. When the guard's footsteps faded, the silence changed. It was no longer the silence of hiding. It was the silence before a blade left its sheath. Elias closed his fingers around the bell. "My name is Kalen Ashbourne," he said. Lena had known it a moment before he said it. Hearing the words still stole the air from her lungs. Marcus dropped to one knee. Kalen turned toward the sound. "Stand, Commander." "My king," I said, "stand." His voice did not grow louder, but something in it made the old floorboards seem to listen. "You will kneel when we have earned the right to ask anyone in this kingdom to kneel again." Marcus rose. Lena did not move. She thought of every morning she had guided his hand to a medicine bottle, every night he had sat outside her door while pain burned through her injured wolf, every piece of bread he had pretended not to leave beside her work table. "You let me call you Elias," she said. "I needed a name that would not get you killed. You let me worry about whether you were eating enough while half the realm was looking for you." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You were strict about soup. Do not make this charming." The smile disappeared. "I am sorry." It was the first answer that did not dodge her. Kalen told them the truth, while wind scraped snow against the shutters. 4 years earlier, he had ridden to Red Hollow to sign a peace accord with Omega settlements that had been taxed and silenced by stronger packs. Malcolm Vane had opposed the treaty. He said mercy would make the throne look weak. Kalen signed anyway. On the road back, a false distress call split his escort. Kalen sent most of his guard to protect civilians trapped inside a burning chapel. The remaining riders were ambushed. Silver ash exploded across the ravine, burning his eyes before he could shift. Moonbane entered his blood through the wounds. It did not kill him. That was the cruelty of it. "It buried my scent," Kalen said. "Blocked the royal bond. Severed my wolf from the surface. A king no animal recognized and no council could verify was easier to turn into a ghost." Marcus looked sick. "We searched the ravine for weeks. You were meant to. Malcolm needed loyal men far from the palace while he burned records." Lena gripped the desk. "How did you reach the stables?" "Amos found me. He hid me in a hay wagon and brought me through the lower gate. I wanted to go straight to the council, but Malcolm controlled the physicians, the heralds, and half the guard. A blind man claiming to be a missing king would have been called a mad imposter before sunset. So you stayed here," Lena whispered. "I stayed where Malcolm never looked closely. Among servants, among Omegas, among people powerful men underestimate." His face turned toward her. "I planned to leave when I found proof," he continued. "Then Amos was arrested. The ledger vanished. Nightfall was drugged. The hounds stopped responding. And then you found me in the snow with no reason to risk anything for me. You still should have told me." "Yes. Before I spent 4 years arguing with a king about hoof rot." Kalen's mouth twitched. "You were right. That is not the point. I know." Marcus cleared his throat. "If the ledger is true, Malcolm needs the oath ceremony. The crown cannot pass while your blood remains alive but unrecognized. If Nightfall and the hounds are poisoned, no living witness will challenge him. Then we give them back their memory," Lena said. Kalen turned to her. "Moonbane can be countered. In animals, yes. I need black vervain, winter myrrh, and ashroot. It grows in the royal greenhouse," Marcus said, "behind the locked south glass." "No," Kalen said immediately. Lena laughed once without humor. You do not get to reveal you are the Alpha King and then go back to ordering me around like a worried groom. I am asking you not to walk into Malcolm's guarded garden alone. You cannot go. Marcus cannot be seen helping me. I can still move through servant passages. Kaelin's hand closed around the bell. Lena. The way he said her name hurt more than a command would have. She stepped closer. I stood beside you when you owned one coat and half a bed. The crown is not the part that frightens me. His hand lifted, then stopped before touching her cheek. Lena could have stepped away. She did not. His fingers brushed hair from her face with a gentleness that made the room feel too small. Then Marcus coughed. By midnight, their plan was set. Lena would make Wando strong enough for nightfall and the wolfhounds. Marcus would search for loyal guards. Kaelin would remain hidden until the Crown Oath Ball. Before dawn, Lena slipped into the royal greenhouse. She found the ashroot beneath a pane of blue glass. Then a hand closed around her arm. Grant Mercer stepped from behind the citrus trees, his alpha ring glinting in the moonlight. He looked at the root in her hand, then at the royal signet cord half hidden beneath her collar. Tell me what the blind man promised you, Grant said, and I may convince the regent to spare your life. Grant did not drag Lena from the greenhouse. That would have been easier to hate. He kept his grip firm around her arm and walked her through the moonlit glass corridors as if he were escorting her somewhere safe. The ashroot crushed in her fist gave off a bitter smell. Behind them, the royal greenhouse glimmered with silver panes and sleeping citrus trees, making betrayal look clean. You do not understand what you are involved in, Grant said. Lena tried to pull free. Then explain it. A blind servant has filled your head with fantasies. You saw a ring and decided I was guilty. I saw the missing king's signet on an Omega, who has been desperate for belonging since the day Silverpine let her go. The words landed where he meant them to. Lena kept walking, because stopping would only let him see the wound. Silverpine did not let me go, she said. You cast me out. Grant's jaw tightened. I made a hard decision for my pack. You made a convenient one for yourself. 2 guards met them near the lower palace door. They wore Malcolm's black and silver crest. Grant handed Lena over with reluctant righteousness. The kind men wore when they wanted betrayal mistaken for duty. Regent Malcolm Vane waited in the private council chamber, fully dressed despite the hour. A fire burned behind him. On the table lay the royal signet, Amos Bell's ledger, and the broken remains of Elias's cane. Lena's blood turned cold. Where is he? She asked. Malcolm smiled faintly. Safe. The door opened again. 2 guards forced Kaelin inside with iron cuffs around his wrists. His blind eyes were uncovered, cloudy and pale beneath the lanterns. There was blood at his temple, but he walked without stumbling. He turned his face toward Lena before anyone spoke. Are you hurt? He asked. She hated that those were his first words. Malcolm observed them with interest. Remarkable. 4 years beside a servant and still he worries like a king. Grant frowned. My lord? Malcolm ignored him. Miss Hart, you have been misled by a dangerous man. Fortunately, damage can still be contained. He gestured to the chair before him. Lena did not sit. Tomorrow night, before every northern pack, you will testify that Elias Gray manipulated you. You will say he stole the signet, forged the stablemaster's ledger, and poisoned the royal animals to support his false claim. That is not true. Truth is what survives witnesses. Kaelin's chains clinked softly. Do not answer him, Lena. Malcolm's eyes flashed. You will have your turn in public, imposter. Then he turned back to her and softened his voice. If you cooperate, your record will be restored. The palace will recognize that you were deceived, not treasonous. I will send a letter to Silverpine requiring them to receive you with honor. Grant Mercer has already agreed to renew his offer of protection. Grant looked uncomfortable but did not deny it. Lena stared at him. Protection. He stepped closer. You would not have to sleep above a stable anymore. You would have a place again. A place beside you? If the regent clears your name, yes, we could begin again. For one dangerous second, Lena saw the life he was offering. A warm room, a pack table, no servant's entrance, no laughter when noble daughters smelled hay on her dress. The girl who had stood under silver pine banners 4 years ago might have wept for it. But that girl had not yet learned what a place cost when it was bought by abandoning someone else. Lena looked at Kalen. He was standing still, but his face had gone tight with a fear he could not command away. He was not afraid of Malcolm. He was afraid she would take the offer because part of him believed she deserved a life untouched by his ruin. You are offering me a place among people who only value me when I betray someone weaker, Lena said. I would rather remain rejected. Grant flinched as if she had struck him. Malcolm's courtesy disappeared. Then you will stand trial as the traitor's accomplice. Guards took Kalen away first. Lena heard one blow land in the corridor after the door shut. She moved toward the sound, but 2 soldiers caught her arms. Malcolm leaned close. You confuse loyalty with love, Miss Hart. Men like him are skilled at making women sacrifice themselves for causes they will never be allowed to share. Lena met his eyes. And men like you are skilled at calling cruelty order. She was thrown into a holding room beneath the West Gallery. No chains, no torture, no dramatics. Malcolm was too clever for bruises before a public trial. He left her with clean water, bread, and enough quiet to think about how completely she had failed. Near dawn, the door opened. Seraphine Vane entered alone. Lena rose. Come to practice your testimony? Seraphine's face was paler than usual. My father killed Amos Bell. Yes. I found the prison transfer order. Amos was dead before he reached the northern cells. Her voice shook despite her efforts. My father signed it. Lena watched her carefully. Why tell me? Because I was raised to believe Kalen Ashbourne abandoned the throne. I was not raised to help bury him twice. She slipped something from her sleeve. The ashroot Lena had dropped in the greenhouse. A second figure appeared behind her. Commander Marcus. We have 2 hours before the ball, he said. Can you finish the antidote? Lena took the ashroot. For Nightfall and the Hounds, yes. For Kalen? She looked down. There was not enough. 1 dose. 1 true chance. Kalen's sight. Or the living witnesses that could prove him. The answer hurt, because she knew what he would choose. By sunset, Lena had hidden the finished antidote inside the hollow pendant at her throat. Seraphine returned to the ballroom wearing diamonds and a practiced smile. Marcus went to find the guards whose oaths had not been poisoned. Lena allowed herself to be led upstairs between Malcolm's soldiers. The Crown Oath Ball waited beyond the great doors. From inside, Malcolm's voice rang out. Bring in the blind impostor, he commanded. Let the kingdom watch its final lie die. The ballroom doors opened, and every candle in Stonehaven seemed to lean toward the spectacle Malcolm Vane had prepared. Lena entered between 2 guards, her grey servant dress cleaned just enough to make the wine stain look like proof of carelessness instead of cruelty. Around her, the Crown Oath Ball had become a court of judgment. Noble families filled the galleries. Alpha daughters stood beneath house banners. At the far end, Malcolm waited beside the throne with the cracked moon crown on a velvet cushion, its fracture hidden beneath silver ribbon. Seraphine stood near him, beautiful and unreadable, one hand resting on the gate key hidden in her gown. Grant Mercer watched from the front row. When Lena passed him, he lowered his voice. It is not too late. Lena did not stop. For me, or for your conscience? His face closed. The guards forced her below the dais. Malcolm raised one hand, and the hall quieted. Tonight, he said, before the moon crown chooses a ruler, we must cleanse this palace of the last poison left by the king's disappearance. A man calling himself Elias Gray has used the kindness of an unstable omega to support a treasonous lie. Murmurs spread. Lena heard unstable omega moving from mouth to mouth like smoke. Then Kalen was brought in. They had dressed him in the same worn stable coat he had worn for years. No cloak, no sword, no crown, no sign of royal blood except the bearing no chain could teach. His wrists were bound, his ruined eyes were uncovered. Blood darkened one side of his hair, but his steps were steady. He turned his head before anyone guided him. The brass bell at Lena's wrist gave one small sound. Kalen walked toward it. A guard shoved him back. "Face the council." Kalen did not obey. He kept moving until he stood beside Lena. Malcolm smiled thinly. "Touching. Even now he performs devotion." "He does not perform," Lena said. "That is why you fear him." Malcolm's smile vanished for only a breath. He lifted the royal signet for all to see. This was found in the possession of Elias Gray, a servant with no lineage, no papers, and no explanation. "Miss Hart, did this man hide his identity from you?" "Yes." Whispers surged. Kalen's face remained still. "Did he possess the missing king's seal?" "Yes." "Did he encourage you to believe he might be more than a stableman?" Lena looked at Kalen. 4 years passed through her in fragments. His hand finding hers after nightmares. His quiet instructions when alpha voices tried to press her down. The half loaf of bread by her medicine chest. The way he always stood between cruelty and whatever it wanted to break. "No," she said. "He never asked me to believe in a crown." Malcolm's eyes sharpened. Lena turned to the hall. "He asked for work. He asked for water when fever took him. He asked me to describe the sunrise once because he could not see it. He shared food when he had less than I did. He protected stable children and servants who had no rank to offer him. He taught me to stand upright when people like you called that rebellion. If he had wanted power, he would have taken it from the weak first. He never did." Grant looked away. Malcolm laughed softly. "Kindness does not prove blood." "No," Lena said. "But cruelty does not prove strength." A flicker moved through the crowd. Malcolm sensed it and struck before it grew. "Enough. Let the royal witnesses be brought." Handlers opened the side gates. The palace wolfhounds stumbled in first, muzzled and weak from moonbane. Behind them, men dragged Nightfall with chains around his chest and neck. The great black warhorse swayed on his feet, body shaking with poison. Kalen's restraint cracked. "What have you done to him?" he asked. Malcolm spread his hands. "The beast is dangerous, like all creatures loyal to dead kings." Lena touched the pendant at her throat. "1 dose. Kalen's sight, or Nightfall's memory." Kalen heard the tiny click of it opening. "No," he said. She froze. "Save him." The words were quiet but absolute. Lena looked at his clouded eyes and understood what he was giving up. "You may never see again. I know. Kalon. Truth first." For the first time, she had used his real name before the kingdom. Malcolm moved. "Stop her." Seraphine acted faster. She stepped into the path of the nearest guard and spilled ceremonial wine across his boots. It looked like an accident until she turned the gate key behind her. Marcus Reed's voice cut through the hall. "Royal Guard, hold." Not every soldier obeyed. "Enough," hesitated. Lena ran to Nightfall. A handler grabbed her sleeve, but the horse struck him aside with the last of his strength. Lena drove the needle into the vein beneath Nightfall's neck and pressed the antidote home. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Malcolm smiled. Then Nightfall inhaled. The sound rolled through the hall like thunder. His head lifted. His black eyes cleared. The chains rattled as he tore one hoof free, then another. Kalen raised his face. 3 short notes left his lips. Nightfall answered with a cry so fierce the chandeliers trembled. He crossed the marble, stronger with every step. When he reached Kalen, the great warhorse lowered his head into the blind man's hand. Then he folded his front legs and knelt. The wolfhounds followed, muzzles touching marble. Old guards gasped as an invisible bond, woke oaths buried beneath 4 years of lies. Marcus Reed dropped to one knee. "My king." The words broke the room. Seraphine lowered her head. Several guards followed. Then servants. Then soldiers. The waves spread until the only people standing near the dais were Malcolm, Grant, Lena, and Kaelin. The moon crown split beneath its silver ribbon. Malcolm backed away. "Animals can be trained." Kaelin turned toward his voice. "You poisoned them so they would forget me," he said. "You forgot loyalty has a memory." Malcolm's face twisted. "Kill the Omega." A guard seized Lena from behind. Kaelin lifted one bound hand. The air changed. For 4 years, he had lived without sight, throne, or name. But when his voice crossed the hall, it carried the weight of every oath that had ever belonged to House Ashbourne. "Release her." The guard's fingers opened, as if burned. Kaelin stepped forward, and the chains around his wrists fell slack in the shaking hands of men who could no longer remember why they had dared bind him. "Malcolm Vane," he said, "your oath ends tonight." For a heartbeat after Kaelin spoke, no one moved. The ballroom held its breath around the fallen chains, the kneeling warhorse, and the blind man in a worn stable coat who had just made armed guards obey with a single command. Malcolm Vane recovered first. His hand slid beneath his ceremonial cloak and emerged with a narrow silver blade, its edge darkened by moonbane. "Do not be fools," Malcolm snapped. "He is blind, poisoned, and half feral from years among servants." "One trick with an animal does not make a king." Kaelin turned toward him. "No, but murdering one makes you a traitor." The word struck harder than a shout. Malcolm's personal guards drew their swords. Marcus Reed rose at once, and the old royal guard divided in a clean, terrifying line. Some men stepped toward the throne. Others stepped toward Kaelin. Noble families scattered back as the ballroom became a battlefield waiting for permission. Lena reached for the brass bell at her wrist. Kaelin heard the tiny movement. "Stay behind me." "No." His mouth tightened. "Lena, you are blind, chained, and surrounded, and you are unarmed. I have been unarmed my entire life. Move left." A sword came from his right. Lena rang the bell once, sharp and high, then shouted, "Lo!" Kaelin dropped before the blade crossed his throat. His shoulder struck the attacker's ribs. One bound wrist broke the man's grip. Marcus took the guard down before he could rise. Another rushed from the steps. 3 paces. Lena called, "Column." Kaelin pivoted around the marble column as if he could see it. The guard's blade struck stone. Kaelin caught his elbow and threw him into the dais. The hall erupted. Nightfall reared, driving 2 soldiers back. The wolfhounds, freed from moonbane but still weak, formed a growling wall between the servants and Malcolm's men. Seraphine pulled a dagger from beneath her jeweled sleeve and cut the muzzles from the nearest hounds. Grant stood frozen near the front row, face drained of color. "Help them," Lena shouted. He looked at Malcolm, then at her, searching for the safest side. That told her enough. Malcolm lunged toward Lena. Kaelin heard the movement, but another guard blocked him. Lena backed away, bell ringing against her wrist. Malcolm caught her by the shoulder and pressed the moonbane blade beneath her jaw. The room stopped again. "Call them off," Malcolm said. "All of them." Kaelin stilled. His face changed, becoming less like the man who had shared stable coffee and more like the ruler Red Hollow had failed to bury. "You always choose a throat someone else cares about," Kaelin said. "I choose leverage. That is why I ruled while you hid in straw. You ruled because I let mercy slow my suspicion. I will not confuse the two again." Malcolm pressed the blade closer. Moonbane burned cold against Lena's skin. "A blind king cannot hold the north. The packs will test you. Enemies will circle. I gave them order." "No," Kaelin said. You gave them fear and taught them to call it peace. Seraphine stepped onto the dais, holding Amos Bell's ledger above her head. Her voice shook, but it carried. My father ordered the Red Hollow ambush. He ordered the Moonbane. He ordered Amos Bell killed before trial. Malcolm's face went grey. Seraphine, I was proud to be your daughter, she said. Do not ask me to be your witness. Marcus opened the ledger before the council elders. Seal marks are intact. Military cipher confirmed. Malcolm Vane acted without crown authority. The oldest councilwoman lowered her head. By ancient law, the moon crown cannot pass to a hand stained by royal blood. The fractured crown answered before Malcolm could. Silver light leaked from the crack, crossed the dais, avoided Malcolm's boots, and flowed toward Kaelin. Malcolm panicked. He shoved Lena forward and raised the blade to strike. Kaelin moved toward the sound of her stumble. Lena rang the bell once, not to call for help, but to tell him exactly where she was. He caught her with one arm and turned, taking Malcolm's strike across his own shoulder instead of her throat. Blood darkened the stable coat. With his free hand, Kaelin caught Malcolm's wrist. Kneel, he said. This time, it was not only command, it was judgment. Malcolm's knees hit the marble so hard the blade clattered away. Every guard still loyal to him followed, forced down by an oath their ambition could no longer silence. Grant dropped last, shaking beneath an alpha power he had once believed Lena unworthy to stand near. Kaelin faced Malcolm. You will not be executed tonight, he said. You will stand trial before the packs you lied to, the servants you silenced, and the families who buried empty coffins because of you. Marcus bound Malcolm's hands. Only then did Kaelin sway. Lena caught him. Your shoulder. I have had worse. You always say that when it is bad. The royal healer pushed through the crowd and examined the wound, then Kaelin's clouded eyes. His expression tightened with pity. The antidote was used on the warhorse, he said quietly. I ordered it, Kaelin replied. Then your sight may not return, your majesty. The Moonbane has been in your blood too long. Lena felt the words like a second blade. I chose wrong. Kaelin turned toward her voice at once. No, if I had saved the dose for you, then Malcolm would have called me a fraud. Nightfall would be dead, and this kingdom would still be kneeling to a lie. His hand found hers. You did not choose a horse over me. You chose the truth over what I wanted for myself. That is why I trusted you. The moon crown lifted from its cushion and drifted through the silver light until it hovered before him. Kaelin did not reach for it immediately. Instead, he extended his hand to Lena. I remember the way to the throne, he said, but I would rather walk it with you. 3 months after the Crown Oath Ball, Stonehaven Palace no longer smelled like polished lies. The black and silver banners of Regent Malcolm Vane had been taken down and burned in the courtyard, while servants, guards, nobles, and packless wolves watched the smoke rise. No one cheered when Malcolm was led to trial. Kaelin had forbidden it. Justice, he said, should not sound like entertainment. Lena sat in the public gallery as Malcolm answered for Red Hollow, the Moonbane, the murdered stablemaster, and every witness silenced beneath his careful rule. He arrived in chains, still trying to make treason sound like sacrifice. I kept the North from tearing itself apart, Malcolm said. A blind king would have invited war. Kaelin stood below the moonlit windows with no crown on his head. The moon crown rested beside the evidence. No, Kaelin said. You feared a king who believed. Omegas, servants, and packless wolves were still part of the kingdom. You did not protect the North from weakness. You protected your power from change. Seraphine Vane testified against her father. Her voice broke only once when she read Amos Bell's death order aloud. Afterward, she removed the Vane crest from her cloak and placed it on the council table. I will not inherit a name built over a grave, she said. Grant Mercer came after the trial. Lena found him outside the eastern stables, standing near the doors where she had once arrived, with 1 cloak and 3 days of food. He looked different without an audience. Smaller, somehow. "I was wrong," he said. "Yes, I should not have rejected you that way." "No," Lena said. "You should not have rejected me for becoming injured while saving your sister." His shame deepened. "I thought strength meant choosing what would protect my future. You chose what protected your pride." Grant looked toward the palace. "Will you be Luna?" Lena almost laughed. There it was again, the old question wearing new clothing. What powerful man had chosen her? What title would make her worthy now? "I will be Lena Hart," she said. "That is the first title I intend to keep." She left him there. By spring, the old punishment wing beneath the eastern stables had been torn open to sunlight. The cells where Moonbane had been stored became treatment rooms. The kennel yard became a training ground for young wolves who struggled to shift. Over the main doors, Kaelin ordered a new name, carved into black stone: Royal Haven. Lena did not ask for jewels, rank, or revenge. She asked for laws. No pack could cast out an Omega for failing to shift. No mating bond would be recognized without spoken consent from both sides. No servant's testimony could be dismissed because an alpha refused to sponsor it. Healers could not be forced to use their gifts under command, contract, or threat. Kaelin signed each decree while Lena stood beside the council table, not behind him. His sight had not returned. Some mornings his eyes were clearer. Other days pain forced him to cover them with black cloth again. Yet he ruled. He listened longer than other kings. He remembered every voice. He knew when fear entered a room before anyone admitted it. When he walked the palace, he no longer used the walls. He used the bell. Lena had tried to take it back once. Kaelin closed his hand around it. "Absolutely not. You are an alpha king. You cannot walk into council meetings carrying a stable bell. I survived 4 years because of this bell. You survived because you are stubborn." That too. On the evening the final decree was sealed, Lena found him in Nightfall's stall. The great warhorse stood calm beneath Kaelin's hand. Moonlight silvered the scar at Kaelin's temple. "You avoided the coronation fitting," Lena said. "I avoided 12 tailors discussing my shoulders as if they were public property. They are royal shoulders now. They remain mine." Lena smiled. "Good answer." Kaelin turned toward her voice. "The council expects me to choose a Luna. I know. I told them the throne has survived enough forced bonds." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, slowly, giving her every chance to move away. She did not. "I will not ask you to stand beside me because a crown approves it," he said. "I will not claim that fate owes me your heart because you saved my life. But if you are willing, may I court you as the man you knew before the kingdom remembered my name." Lena took the brass bell from his hand and tied it around her wrist again. "You may," she said. "But kings still follow their healer's instructions." Kaelin laughed, quiet and real. Then he removed the royal cloak from his shoulders and placed it around hers because the stable had grown cold, not because he wished to mark her as his. Together they stepped into the courtyard with Nightfall walking behind them. No one ordered the watching servants to kneel. No one needed to. The kingdom remembered Kaelin because a royal warhorse had knelt before him. But Kaelin remembered himself because one rejected Omega had treated him like a man long before anyone called him king.